Welcome to a presentation regarding how process philosophy, process theology, process cosmology can change the world using the method of building a model of the whole of reality to understand the interrelationship between God, the physical universe, the individual, and our species, and to understand the individual and our species' purpose for existing. Alfred Whitehead said nobody can be a good reasoner unless by constant practice he has realized the importance of getting hold of the big ideas and hanging on to them like grim death. And what idea can be larger than the idea of understanding the whole of reality and understanding our purpose for existing within the whole? Resolving the issue regarding what is God's essence. We begin step one with God, the physical universe, and you and I and our species. To determine the answer to the question, what is God's essence, we will erase the physical universe and you and I and our species from reality. Our model of reality now becomes what is shown in the diagram. What does the model tell us concerning God's essence? The model tells us nothing about God's essence. If we examine what it is we have erased, we can draw some conclusions regarding what does not make up God's essence. The universe is all of space and time and their contents, including planets, stars, galaxies, and all other forms of matter and energy. The operative word in the definition is the word all, not some, but all. From this, we know God's essence is not composed of space, time, matter, or energy, for we have erased all of space, time, matter, and energy from reality. Since we are using language, words, to clarify concepts, let's continue to define words as we proceed. Let's look up the definition of God. The word God is defined as the creator of the universe. This definition of God, however, does not tell us anything about God's essence. Rather, the definition tells us what God did, not what God is. What then is the definition of the word essence? Essence is described as the basic, real, and invariable nature of a thing, or its significant individual feature or features. Again, we ask, what is God's essence? We know God is not any form of matter or energy, space, or time, for we have erased these forms from existence, from reality. What then is left for us to consider as we explore God's essence? Explore God's basic, real, and variable nature. There are two forms of existence we have not erased from reality at this point. They are 1, knowledge, and 2, knowing, consciousness, awareness. For knowing and knowledge are not composed of matter, energy, space, or time. Is God's essence knowledge? No, God's essence is not knowledge. Knowledge is a passive form. Knowledge just exists. And unless some form of verb action is applied to knowledge, knowledge just sits there. God is not knowledge because knowledge cannot create something. Knowledge is unresponsive, simply exists in an unknown docile state until some form of awareness, consciousness, knowing becomes aware of knowledge and manipulates knowledge. We are then left with knowing, consciousness, awareness. It appears we are left with God's essence being knowing. Is God omniscient? God is not omniscient. For God to be omniscient, God would have to be some form of being, which is all knowing. If God were some form of being, which is all knowing, then we still would not have resolved the question regarding God's essence, regarding the basic, real, and invariable nature of God. If we examine the definition of omniscient, we begin to formulate God's essence. Three statements. One, having complete or unlimited knowledge, awareness, or understanding. Two, an omniscient being. And three, the omniscient God, do not tell us anything regarding what the essence of God is. This is where process philosophy enters the picture. Process philosophy changes the very meaning of the word God with the simple process of changing the T in the word omniscient to a CE, making the word omniscience. The process of changing the concept of God being omniscient to God being omniscience changes our very understanding of God from that of God being some entity which knows to that of God being knowing. This is what is known as major change. Previously, we quoted Whitehead referring to big ideas. The simple process of replacing the T to a CE in the word omniscient generates a big change, is truly a big idea. The concept of God, the divine, being knowing, as opposed to God having knowing, leads us, you and I, and our species, to understand what is meant when religions tell us we are made in the image of God. It is not our physical body that is made in the image of God. Rather, it is our knowing which is made in the image of God. Our spark of knowing is not equal to God, for our sparks of the divine are just that, a spark, a discrete element of knowing, but an element of God nevertheless. Our spark of the divine is what makes us divine in nature. What then of our physical bodies? Our physical bodies are simply biological organisms within which our divine selves travel and experience this physical universe. The understanding that our true essence is the divine spark located within our physical body leads us to major changes in our perception of ourselves. We, our true divine essences, are not black, white, red, yellow, male, female, heterosexual, homosexual, tall, short, smart, mentally challenged, handicapped. All these descriptions are simply characteristics of the machine within which we traverse this universe. Each machine is due the respect we assign to God, for each machine carries a piece of the divine, a spark of God within itself. What then of the earth, our environment? The earth is the province of divine sparks of God journeying the physical, and as such, we would give the earth the respect we would give the house of God. Time does not exist inside God. Time is an element of the physical universe, and we have erased the physical universe. Because God is omniscience, is all of knowing, and because timelessness, eternity, are aspects of God, God confronts the monotony, the despair, the hopelessness of eternal recurrence. Since time did not exist, was not created before the universe was created, it would have taken literally no time at all for God to view all its knowledge. The only respite God finds is in totally quieting itself, quieting knowing. In essence, God simply opened up a void, a region of nothingness, if you wish. This state of quietude is found within God, within omniscience, for there is no other place to put such an existence. The concept of God opening up a void within itself introduces some very interesting ideas for physics. The concept of ex nihilo, the rational understanding of how it is, reality in the sense of physical existence, could reduce down to a void. This concept also introduces something brand new, the concept of anti-energy, and expands upon the concept of a universal constant being zero, and the very resolution to creation ex nihilo. Details of this can be found at the website Panentheism.com. Creating a universe composed of elements which never before existed, composed of space, time, matter, and energy, which never before existed, would provide a means by which knowledge, experiences never before existing, could and would now be created by actually traveling through this new existence called the universe. Creating new knowledge, experiences, would add to the knowledge library omniscience could now experience and know. Creating new knowledge changes the quantity of knowledge God, or higher consciousness, has available, but does not change what God, knowing, is. Knowing is knowing, pure and simple. And as such, the eternally unchanging remains what it is, remains the eternally unchanging. Only the quantity of knowledge changed. The universe thus acts as a type of manufacturing plant, creating new knowledge and experiences never before recorded in God's vast knowledge base, never before found within the libraries of God's knowledge. But what of time? Time is located inside bubbles, inside universes, and the universes are inside God. In a sense, time is quarantined, isolated inside a universe. This isolation, separation of time from God, explains how it is time can exist within God without affecting God's timelessness, affecting God's immortality. God, in the form of pure knowing, would have some means, some capacity to experience events such as a thunderstorm, although it may not be in the same manner as physical beings experience. With the creation of universes, God has not solved the problem of eternal recurrence. The trouble with the universe or universes is that although universes provide a unique form of experiencing, they are all predictable and all follow the natural laws established by the Creator. The predictability of natural, scientific God's laws, mixed in with God's timelessness, may add knowledge and experience to the vast library of knowledge available to the all-knowing, to omniscience, to God. But the additional expansion of total knowledge remains finite in terms of an eternal omniscience. What is the underlying factor generating eternal repeats? Predictability. It's as simple as that, predictability. Eliminating predictability and internal repeats, eternal recurrence, is eliminated. How could God eliminate predictability? God could introduce free will into the universe. The introduction of free will overrides predictability. But wouldn't free will imply the laws of nature can be overruled or canceled out? Free will does not imply the laws of nature can be overruled or canceled out. All physical entities, including humans, have no choice but to follow the laws of nature. What free will does do is introduce unpredictable perceptions leading to unpredictable reactions, which lead to unpredictable multiple reactions to events covered by the laws of physics or nature. Where should I be standing if I want to understand where the universe is located? You should be standing outside our universe, looking down as you hover above our universe. If I float up further out, what would I see? You would see what is diagrammed above. You would see the creator of the universe, within which is located the physical universe within which you exist. Knowing is not a form of physical existence. Knowing has no color. Knowing is not black, red, white, brown. Knowing is just knowing. Knowing has no gender. Knowing has no ovaries, has no testicles, has no estrogen, has no testosterone. Knowing is just knowing. Knowing has no religion. Knowing knows of religion, but knowing in its purest form is simply knowing. And as with religion, knowing has no culture, no geography, no biological form, because knowing is just that, knowing. I like God have knowing. Are you suggesting I am divine in nature? First of all, I am not saying God has knowing. What I have said, what we have concluded through reasonable, rational discussions, is that God is knowing, not God has knowing. I keep coming back to the concept of God being knowing versus God having knowing because the concept is the crux to understanding that our true essence is not our biological form, but rather our true essence is our ethereal form. The universe or universes play a vital role in God resolving the issue of eternal repeats. This is not to say universes are the only means of God finding ways to circumvent eternal repeats. We, you and I, being made in the image of God, being elements of knowing, have the ability to choose what actions we take as we travel a universe governed by the laws of nature. We have the free will to act, just as God has the free will to act. The spark of knowing located within us, without the body, would know something is taking place within the created essence of the physical universe, could travel throughout the physical universe. But the spark within us could not directly experience the physical. If the element of knowing never experienced the physical, then that element of knowing would not be able to empathize, would not know what it is the effects of the physical world would or could have upon oneself upon traveling through the physical by being physical in nature. Knowing of something and experience something are entirely different. Can you explain our purpose as individuals and as a species in brief? We, you and I, individuals, our species, exists to 1. Add new knowledge to God's library of knowledge, add knowledge which has never before existed in the form of art, music, literature, and so forth. And 2, add new knowledge to God's library of knowledge, which has never before existed in the form of unique experiencing through the 5 senses of sight, sound, touch, smell, and through emotions. The point of our existence is to circumvent God's dilemma of facing eternal recurrence, eternal repeats, monotony, boredom, weariness, tedium. If our purpose is to be a means by which God avoids the dilemma of eternal recurrence, eternal repeats, monotony, boredom, weariness, and tedium, etc., does not make us significant, then what possibly could make us as individuals and as a species significant in terms of reality? Why would we lose free will and unique creative abilities if we are directly tied to, connected to, merged with God? When directly tied to, merged with the wholeness of the totality of knowing within God, any attempt to act contrary to the thoughts of God would be quickly subdued by the overpowering thoughts of God. Morality and ethical behaviors have always been defined. What is different about understanding the rationality behind moral and ethical behavior? Upon listing which behaviors are moral and ethical, individuals should ask why the listed behaviors are moral and/or ethical, as opposed to other behaviors, which are listed as immoral and unethical. The rationale given for some behaviors being moral and being ethical had always been because God said so. End of discussion. In this day and age of instantaneous global discourse, stating God said so, end of discussion, does not satisfy a large percentage of people, and thus it is religions are beginning to die out, leaving a vacuum within religious and rational thinking. Nature abhors a vacuum, and as such, the lack of rational understanding of God, the vacuum created by God's presence, is being filled by materialism, secularism, relative truth, physical hedonism, vicious battles for dominance, power, wealth, elitism, group thinking. Thus it is the physical universe can exist within God's knowing. In fact, process philosophy, generically symbiotic panentheism, introduces the rationality that multiple universes, infinite universes, could exist within God's knowing. Only process philosophy, generically symbiotic panentheism, introduces the concept that God is knowing. Without a learning God, there is no process philosophy, no symbiotic panentheism, no rational basis for altruism. Without a learning God, all that remains is materialism. Might makes right, and a violent species ready to step into the vast, unexplored regions of space, carrying with it our tendency towards dominating, subjugating, exploiting all we encounter as we traverse the universe. It is Whitehead who helps lead the charge towards understanding process philosophy, process theology, process cosmology. Some will ask, is process philosophy really important? I ask, what could be more important? Thank you for attending.